Sorry, this isn't a cosplay training session. Who gave you permission to touch the Apache? Colonel Reynolds laughed mockingly. The entire room of young pilots joined in with laughter. The woman remained silent, slowly removing her jacket, revealing a patch with a silver dragon wrapped around 3 black stars. Reynolds froze. Jesus, are you Iron Talon? The entire room went dead silent. Nobody dared speak another word. Main character, Sierra Maddox, 30 years old. Small build, hair tied back neatly, soft-spoken, eyes sharp as if they had seen through many things. She had been a reconnaissance pilot with special operations units, but after an incident not recorded in files, was transferred to Black Hollow Base to work as a technician. Here she wasn't allowed to train on Apaches, despite having piloted them for years before, because she lacked official documentation. Everyone saw her as a dreaming technician. She didn't speak up, didn't argue, just observed. Then one day when they were short-staffed, her name was mistakenly put on the Apache backup trainer list. What people at Black Hollow didn't know was Sierra's real history. Before the transfer, before the mysterious incident that buried her records, she had been one of the most skilled helicopter pilots in special operations. Sierra had flown missions that didn't officially exist, had navigated combat zones where a single mistake meant death for her entire crew. She had learned to pilot Apaches not in comfortable training facilities, but in hostile territory where enemy fire was real and backup was often hours away. The incident that ended her official flying career had been a classified operation gone wrong. Not through her error, but through intelligence failures and political complications. Rather than acknowledge the operation's existence, Command had simply reassigned everyone involved to non-combat roles. Sierra's flight records were sealed. Her commendations were classified. Her expertise was erased from official documentation, so she became a technician, maintaining the same aircraft she had once piloted with extraordinary skill. Every day she watched younger pilots struggle with maneuvers she could perform instinctively, saw them make mistakes that could be fatal in real combat situations, but she said nothing. Just did her job, serviced the equipment, and remained invisible. The other pilots saw her as part of the background, someone who cleaned tools and checked oil levels. They had no idea they were dismissing someone who possessed more flight experience than most of them combined. Sierra endured their casual dismissal with the patience of someone who understood that recognition wasn't always possible. Some missions stay classified forever. Some achievements can never be acknowledged. But skills remain, even when records disappear. CTA Comment Act 1. Ever seen someone skilled looked down upon just because of appearance? Type. So unfair. During the cockpit assignment briefing, Colonel Reynolds saw Sierra's name and frowned. Is this a mistake? She's a technician, isn't she? A young officer started to speak up but was cut off. I'm not entrusting a $35 million helicopter to someone who cleans engines. The entire room erupted in laughter, but Sierra said nothing. She slowly removed her jacket, revealing the silver dragon patch. Symbol of the Iron Talon unit, a top-secret combat group that once operated in Kandahar. Nobody was laughing anymore. Reynolds looked closely, then sighed. Iron Talon. That unit doesn't exist in records, but I've heard about that incident where nobody survived. Sierra simply said, I survived. And I piloted Apaches there, not in simulation, but in real combat zones. The atmosphere in the room shifted completely. The casual mockery evaporated as people began to understand they had been dismissing someone with combat experience. Reynolds studied the patch more carefully. Iron Talon was legendary among military aviation circles, a unit so classified that even mentioning it required security clearance. Stories about Iron Talon were whispered in pilot lounges. Tales of impossible missions, aircraft pushed beyond their limits, pilots who flew through conditions that would ground entire squadrons. That patch, Reynolds said quietly, isn't something you can buy or fake. It's earned through operations that most people will never know happened. The young pilots in the room suddenly felt very inexperienced. They had been mocking someone who had flown real combat missions while they were still in flight school. Sierra remained calm, but her posture had changed. For the first time since arriving at Black Hollow, she stood like the veteran pilot she actually was, Iron Talon operated in contested airspace, she continued. We flew night missions with limited visibility, extracted personnel under enemy fire, provided close air support in situations where backup wasn't available. Reynolds nodded slowly. I remember hearing about Kandahar operations. Helicopters flying in conditions that should have been impossible. We did what was necessary, Sierra replied simply. The room remained silent as people processed this revelation. The quiet technician they had been ignoring was actually a combat veteran with experience that exceeded most of their instructors. One young pilot finally found his voice. Ma'am, why didn't you tell us? Sierra's answer was straightforward. Because classified operations stay classified. And because respect based on past achievements isn't real respect. Reynolds stood up, his demeanor completely changed. Miss Maddox, I owe you an apology. We all do. No apology necessary, Colonel. But I would appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate my current capabilities. You'll have that opportunity immediately. The transformation was complete. Sierra was no longer seen as an out-of-place technician, but as an experienced pilot whose skills had been hidden by bureaucracy and classification levels. CTA Common Act 2. Ever been rejected just because they didn't know who you used to be? Type, been there too. Reynolds signaled for Sierra to step into the simulation cockpit, under the doubtful eyes of the young pilots. She controlled the simulated Apache like it was an extension of her body, knew how to disable AI to avoid signal interference, entered coordinates manually without needing HUD, executed vintage techniques that only people with real combat experience would use. The entire room went dead silent. A trainee whispered, "She's not learning for the test. She's flown for real." The next day, Sierra was allowed to fly with a group of officers. She landed smoother than textbook perfect. Reynolds stood on the runway, eyes never leaving. When Sierra stepped down, he said nothing, just raised his hand in salute like a silent apology. The demonstration flight was unlike anything the observers had witnessed. Sierra's movements in the cockpit were fluid, automatic, born from hundreds of hours of real flight time. She didn't need to think about basic controls. Her hands found switches and levers instinctively, while her attention focused on tactical considerations. During pre-flight checks, she identified potential issues that the younger pilots had missed. Problems that were minor in training but could be catastrophic in combat. Your hydraulic pressure is slightly low, she mentioned to the crew chief, within acceptable parameters for training, but I'd want it checked before any extended operations. The crew chief double-checked his instruments, then looked at her with new respect. You're right. How did you catch that so quickly? Experience, Sierra replied simply. Once airborne, Sierra demonstrated maneuvers that pushed the Apache to its operational limits while maintaining complete safety margins. She flew terrain-following patterns that required split-second timing and absolute spatial awareness. Control. This is remarkable flying, the chase pilot reported. She's navigating terrain features like she's done this route 1,000 times. But what impressed observers most wasn't the advanced techniques. It was Sierra's complete composure under pressure. When the simulation introduced emergency scenarios, she responded with the calm efficiency of someone who had faced real emergencies. Engine failure protocols, navigation system malfunctions, communication blackouts. She handled each challenge methodically, as if they were routine occurrences. Ma'am, one of the young pilots asked after landing, how do you stay so calm during emergencies? Sierra's answer was matter-of-fact. When you've flown missions where people's lives actually depend on your decisions, simulation emergencies feel manageable. The flight instructor, who had been observing, approached Reynolds after the demonstration. Colonel, I've been training Apache pilots for 15 years. What I just witnessed represents mastery-level skills. She's not just qualified, she's exceptional. Reynolds nodded grimly, and we almost refused to let her touch the aircraft. Word of Sierra's demonstration spread quickly through the base. By evening, everyone knew that the quiet technician was actually an elite pilot whose skills exceeded most of their instructors. The young pilots who had been mocking her now approached with genuine respect, asking for guidance and advice. Sierra accepted their change in attitude gracefully, without any trace of resentment for their earlier dismissal. Flying isn't about ego, she told them. It's about competence and safety. help each other get better. But the most significant change was in Reynolds himself. He realized that his assumptions about rank and appearance had nearly cost the unit access to invaluable expertise. That evening, he reviewed Sierra's classified files, the ones that required special clearance to access. What he found confirmed everything. Sierra Maddox had been one of the finest helicopter pilots in special operations, with commendations for actions that would never be publicly acknowledged. Her transfer to Black Hollow hadn't been a demotion. It had been protective reassignment after operations too sensitive to remain in official records, and they had been treating her like an entry-level technician. CTA Comment Act 3. Ever made someone change their attitude? Just through actions? Type. They went silent. Sierra declined praise, declined honorary positions. She only asked to open a private technical class every Saturday evening for anyone who wanted to learn more deeply. Initially, only 1 to 2 people participated. After 1 month, the entire base was talking. Want to know how to survive with an Apache? Asked Miss Maddox. A new recruit asked, that patch, do you still keep it because you're proud? Number. I keep it to remind myself, nobody should have to learn those things alone. Sierra became a role model, not for fame, but because she was there, quietly, long enough to prove herself. Her Saturday classes became legendary among the aviation community. Sierra taught techniques that weren't in any manual, skills learned through necessity in combat situations. She showed them how to fly when instruments failed, how to navigate using terrain features, how to maintain aircraft performance under extreme conditions. But more than technical skills, she taught judgment, how to assess risks, make decisions under pressure, prioritize mission objectives while keeping crews safe. Flying an Apache isn't just about controlling the aircraft, she would tell her students. It's about understanding that every decision affects the people counting on you. Word spread beyond Black Hollow. Other bases requested Sierra as a consultant for advanced training programs. She accepted some assignments, always focusing on practical knowledge that could save lives, but she preferred hands-on teaching to administrative roles. Theory is important, she would say, but there's no substitute for experience. I can share what I've learned, but you have to build your own judgment. Her influence extended beyond technical training. Sierra became a mentor for anyone who felt overlooked or undervalued. Your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition, she would tell struggling pilots. It's determined by your competence and dedication. Years later, many of her students credited Sierra with transforming their understanding of aviation excellence. Not because she demanded recognition, but because she demonstrated that true expertise speaks for itself. The Iron Talon patch remained on her uniform, not as a boast about past achievements, but as a reminder of responsibility. She had survived operations where others hadn't. That survival carried an obligation to share knowledge, to help others develop skills that might save their lives. Sierra's legacy became not just her own achievements, but the pilots she had trained and the lives they would save through competence she had helped them develop. CTA Comment Act 4. Do you believe quiet people are usually the most skilled? Type. Exactly right. There are patches that only survivors get to wear. Not everyone understands those symbols. That's okay, because someday they'll make a laughing room suddenly go silent. No need to shout, no need to explain. Just remove the jacket and let the patch tell the rest. The most powerful credentials aren't printed on certificates. They're sewn into fabric that's been through fire. Sierra's story reminds us that true expertise doesn't announce itself. It just performs when the moment demands it. Her patch represented more than personal achievement. It symbolized the sacrifices of people who serve in operations that can't be acknowledged. Some heroes wear uniforms that can't be photographed. Some missions succeed without appearing in history books. Some achievements matter precisely because they remain classified. But skills endure, even when records disappear. Experience speaks, even when words aren't allowed. And sometimes a simple patch can silence an entire room, because it represents something that can't be faked. Competence earned through circumstances most people will never face. CTA Comment Conclusion. Know someone who's being undervalued? Tag them and write, your patch still has value.